Welcome to Mean Green Game Day here on NTTV as we look ahead to week 2 of UNT college football ahead to SMU. Hi, I'm Zach Fox alongside Rachel Sanders, Connor Hibbett, and Mark Barrera as we look ahead to a team that's given UNT a lot of trouble in recent years, haven't had a win at SMU since 1933, despite beating SMU at home at Apogee in 2018. So a lot to go over today, a lot to go over since last week. Taking on Northwestern State, UNT puts up a nice win, 44-14, and continue their opening week win streak to keep that alive as have a big game. We can talk a lot of the quarterback side of things, we can talk the defensive side of things, but I want to talk the rushing side of things. There was a lot of questions going into the regular season. Is our rushing game going to be good enough? You lose Oscar Attaway to injury, you lose Trey Siggers to SMU, and so now you're down to the fifth-year senior in DeAndre Torrey, 244 rush yards. Rachel, how good was this rushing game, and can this hold throughout the regular season?
I mean, he put on a show, definitely. He had 320 all-purpose yards, which is a career high for him. He also had 3 touchdowns to put that on top. I think it really depends on the offensive line. If the offensive line can stay healthy, I think we're going to see a really good DC year for Torrey. It could be really a breakout year. He could put up numbers like even bigger than Harden last year.
Yeah, you mentioned the offensive line. The offensive line, actually, of the 5 starters, 4 of them are seniors this year, so taking advantage of the seniors coming back for the 5th-year deal. Now, as far as Mark, losing Trey Siggers last year, we have 4 freshmen, 1 sophomore, and only 1 senior in Oscar Attaway. Obviously, the pressure is going to be on his shoulders. Do you think he's able to withstand that load?
I do believe he is. Last game he showed that he was able to have 25 attempts and look like he wasn't really even tired at all. That offensive line does a great job of getting to the next level, with the right tackle, Brammer, being an all-conference tackle and filling up holes for him. I think he will. He's a great running back, and I think he'll be able to perform all season.
So UNT going to the defensive side of things now. They did allow 418 yards total. However, they looked better this week. They had a couple turnovers. They actually made history in the lowest points that they'd allowed in a long time. Now, is this something for the defensive side? Katie Davis, 14 tackles. That's his career high, and I mean, he went off last week, and just like it seemed like every play, Katie Davis was there. Do you think that the defense, knowing the good, how they're going right now, a better defensive year than they did last year, at least so far, do you think at least knowing that you're on the right track can be good moving forward? I mean, we are only 1 week in. Connor, I'll take it to you.
Psychologically, it has a huge impact. I think coming into the season, there was the idea that the fans were back, the psyche is there, and I think you saw that across college football. Week 0, we saw that with Illinois and Nebraska. Illinois' defense played very well, and we saw it last weekend in week 1 with UNT against Northwestern State. We gave up some yards, but the most important thing is we looked better competitively. Sometimes it's not all about the stats and the score. Sometimes it's really what's there mentally. And the UNT defense seemed to be psyched up. Obviously, we had the fans there. It was loud. In fact, the first play, UNT had a tackle for loss. The crowd was going crazy. That's what this 2021 Renaissance year of college football is all about, and I think it's going to play a huge dividend for UNT's defense as the season progresses. Now, UNT's schedule is very difficult, but from a competitive standpoint, I expect a lot of improvement for the UNT defense.
Now, let's go ahead and flip the playing field as we go to the offensive side of things. Obviously, we had a lot of trouble last year finding a stable quarterback in Jason Bean or even Austinati. Bean transfers to Kansas, and now you have an incoming transfer in Jace Reuter. Reuter started 3 of the 4 quarters last week, goes 10 of 21 passing, 131 yards passing, and he does have a touchdown pass, but also 2 interceptions. Rachel, what do you make of Jace Reuter's performance?
I mean, it's his first time being on the field in a while. I'm slightly worried with his age, still being young, and it's his first taste of this rivalry with SMU coming up. I'm a little worried, but I think it's a good start for him, and if he needs to clean up the interceptions, and I think he'll do a very good job going forward.
Yeah, so you mentioned that, he's had a lot of injuries throughout his college football career, 3 seasons with UNC, rather, and every opening day, he was hurt week 1. He kept getting hurt and was out for the remainder of the season, decides to transfer to UT. So what we saw was Jace Ruder history. We actually played an entire game basically, and he got the win out of it. So yeah, he was rusty, but is this something that you can kind of sweep under the rug like, hey, it's going to happen? It's basically his first college football game. And is this, early on, are you seeing, Mark, I'll take it to you, do you think this is a quarterback that we can maybe call home for the remainder of the year?
I think it is. I really do. You know, he was backing up. He was with Mac Brown at UNC, and that's a very good coach. I think he's developed him very well. I think he will. I think he's a very capable quarterback, and you gotta say he was sharing snaps with Austin Aune throughout all camp. He was splitting it, so he didn't really know whether he was going to be starting or not. As you said, he was hurt very much throughout his college football career. So I do believe he'll be able to get progressively better throughout the season.
You mentioned Austin Aune, and he did come in the fourth quarter, had a few good plays. Connor, do you think that if things go wrong potentially later on today when it comes to SMU, do you think Seth Littrell will be kind of early on to pull the plug, say the first quarter, if things are going haywire? Do you think he'll be pull the plug early on this offense and Jace Ruder and put Austin Aune in?
I definitely think it's a good possibility. What I saw from Jace Ruder last weekend against Northwestern State, he had a couple deep balls that he could have been, if he were more accurate, he would have led the receiver, because the receivers had a couple steps in the defender. It would have likely been a touchdown, at least a goal-to-go situation, but he threw it behind, resulted in an incomplete pass. Now, sometimes the quarterback can get bailed out, the defensive back underplays it, the ball's underthrown, and there'll be a pass interference. Unfortunately for UNT, last weekend that wasn't the case. But I definitely think if UNT falls behind early against SMU today, that you're going to see a quarterback change. At this point against SMU, I really think we need to experiment with Austin Aune and Jace Ruder. Jace Ruder's likely going to get the start, but I would not be surprised if SMU got off to a quick 14-0, 21-3 lead first quarter or first half some point that we see Austin Aune come into the game. But remember last year we had Jason Bean and Austin Aune split reps at quarterback a lot. I think you're going to be seeing that this year with Ruder and Aune.
So last year, UNT's offense actually ranked number 8 in the nation with averaging 513 yards a game. And going back to week 1 of this year, 527 yards, all-purpose yards just in week 1. So definitely picking up right where they left off, and it's the defensive side of things that we want to fix. And they seem to be a lot better in week 1. So on the flip side here, as with Katie Davis leading the defense, and now what looks like Jace Ruder leading the offense, both were in the right direction week 1. So, Mark, which of the two played more of an important role in week 1 and potentially looking forward, offense or defense?
I think you have to go with the defense. The defense was historically bad last year. I think it was the second worst in all of college football. So you have to go with the defense. They couldn't stop anybody from running the ball. I think the average team playing them was 300 yards rushing. So you got to go with the defense. That defense stepped up a lot. As Connor said, they're very hyped up to play the game. And I really do. I think it's the defense.
And Connor, I'll go ahead and ask you the exact same thing.
Well, I remember during the spring there was talk with the new coordinators that there seemed to be a lot more energy on the field, and I definitely saw that in week 1. But moving forward, I definitely think it's going to start with the defense. As Mark said, the defense didn't perform very well last season. So I definitely think it starts with the defense. We know Seth Littrell is going to get the best out of our offense. No matter if it's Ruder, Aune, no matter who's getting involved in the passing game, we do have to open up our passing game a little bit more this weekend. We're going to have to. But moving forward, the defense, it's going to start with the defense. When you look at UNT's schedule, they play SMU this weekend, then it's UAB, Louisiana Tech, you play Marshall, Missouri, Liberty. You play a lot of good quarterbacks during that stretch. So the defense is going to have to be better if UNT wants a chance in those games.
And Rachel, I'll go ahead and ask you. So it looks like since Jalen Darden has left and now he's in the NFL playing for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but we definitely know him as Mr. Record Holder here at Apogee Stadium and all the good work he's done. But now we're looking ahead to even the younger talent. We have sophomore Roderick Burns. He came in and had 113 yards receiving last Saturday, along with the touchdown reception and the only touchdown pass thrown by Jace Ruder that day. So what you're seeing out of this young talent from Roderick Burns?
I think Burns is going to be someone we're definitely going to go to. I still think Torrey's going to take a lot of the load for the offense himself, but I still think Reuter's going to be someone that you're going to have to go to in those times when you're going to need just to pass the ball to someone, get a touchdown. And I think he could essentially be your number one receiver, and it's going to be exciting to see him develop throughout the rest of the season.
And Connor, I'm going to go ahead and ask you real quick. Something we don't talk about very much is the defensive up front. And someone who really had their name come up and shine several times last week and made a lot of tackles was defensive lineman Deon Noville. Big guy, and he gets in there and had several tackles. And so what do you think, like the guys up front, ahead of this game in an offensive power team as SMU, what do you think the importance of this defensive up front?
It's going to the defensive line for UNT is going to have to perform very well today because SMU has a wide open spread offense. They're going to be passing the ball all over the field. So UNT, in my opinion, they're going to have to play with at least 5-6 defensive backs at a time. So it's going to be vital for the defensive line to get penetration without bringing extra guys. Keep in mind, SMU's got a very explosive receiving core, so you don't want your corners on islands against them. So you want to be able to get penetration without having to bring extra guys. So Noville, as well as the Murphy twins, they're going to have to create pressure on Mordecai, the quarterback for SMU, unless it's going to be a long day for the UNT defense.
Well, a great week last week for UNT, and as we look ahead to SMU, hopefully that will transpire. But UNT was not the only Conference USA team with success last week. We have teams from UTSA to UTEP. A lot of teams from Conference USA got their first win and are looking good. The question is if they can stay on top of the mountain. So when we return, we'll go ahead and talk that over. And that's about it for now. So for week one, as we look ahead to week two, and a lot of good stuff to look forward to this week, Conference USA. So stick around. Welcome back to Mean Green Game Day. A lot to kind of go over with the Conference USA teams. We talked about North Texas, but let's go ahead and start looking a little deeper. There's a lot of good talent, especially what we've seen the upcoming years, and that's UTSA. Mark, I'm going to go ahead and start with you. UTSA actually beat Illinois 37-30. And what are you kind of seeing out of this squad? They've been really dominating in the past couple years. Do you kind of expect that to kind of roll throughout that way throughout the rest of the season?
I do. I really do. And, you know, like you said, they're starting to have a really rich history of producing a lot of talent. They had Marcus Davenport get drafted, and he's with the Saints right now. And this receiver that they have, number 4, Zachary Franklin, he was making the Illinois defense look ridiculous. It was crazy. He was catching all balls over heads people, getting yards after catch. They're looking really good. UTSA could win the CUSA, I should say, maybe.
All right, kind of a bold move. Rachel, do you kind of agree with Mark here with UTSA potentially has a chance to ride the coattails and go right up top?
I think they have a great chance. I think winning a Power 5 conference team and being a Big Ten school really brings confidence to a team that you can't get any other way. And I really think with Frank Harris throwing 280 yards and getting the experience that he has as a super senior and being there for 5 years, I think he's going to be very dominant, and I'm going to be worried when we have to play UTSA later this year.
Another team that's looking really good right now and already took down a pretty good team, that is the Charlotte 49ers. The 49ers coming off of a 31-28 victory against Duke. And do you think, Connor, do you think that potentially Charlotte could also pose a threat to our Mean Green?
I don't think Charlotte's going to be a great team in Conference USA this season. I think a lot of it had to do with Duke's just in a huge rebuild this season. Duke came into the season. David Cutcliffe's been there at Duke for a long time, but they had a lot of question marks this season. Offensive line, quarterback. There's just not a lot of good vibes going on at Duke right now. So I think Charlotte took advantage of Duke in a transition year. Now, obviously, that's a good win for Charlotte. I'm not trying to lessen that win by any means, but I don't think Charlotte is the best team in the East this year. When you got Marshall, Western Kentucky, Florida Atlantic, I don't think Charlotte is the class of the East, but certainly they are going to be a team that could get to a bowl game this year because Duke was one of those toss-up games, if you will, coming into the season. Charlotte was looking at about 5-6 wins, so that win possibly would get them to that 6-win threshold.
Now, a team who's going to be taking on some hefty competition today, UAB. The Dragons took out Jackson State last week, 31-0. But hey, enjoy that, but definitely looked ahead to film because this week they're taking on number 2 in the nation, the Georgia Bulldogs. Mark, what are your thoughts on potentially UAB? Let's see how they can do.
Listen, that quarterback for UAB, Tyler Johnson III, he is very accurate with placing the ball where he wants the ball. UAB is always usually the most talented team in the CUSA, and there's a reason they wanted to play Georgia. They wanted to test to see how good this football team is. I obviously think Georgia's going to win, but UAB, I do believe, can make it very competitive for Georgia and give them a little scare.
Connor, do you agree?
I totally agree. Georgia's coming off a big emotional win against Clemson. Anytime you get a team coming off a big win, they usually start a little bit slow. Another little note about this game, Georgia's starting quarterback JT Daniels will not be playing. Now, this Georgia offense isn't great by any means, at least right now. A lot of the receiving core is depleted right now. So I wouldn't be surprised with UAB playing really good defense like they always have the last few years under Bill Clark if this game is a little bit, if it's close from the start. Now, Georgia's winning. That's the precedent about that game. I am not saying UAB in the upset by any means, but the spread right now is about 23. I'm not sure if Georgia will cover that. Again, it could start off slow, but Georgia wins. UAB does not have enough offense to be able to exploit the Georgia defense, and quite frankly, I don't know if anyone does.
Conference USA teams taking on SEC teams doesn't happen too often, but when it does, it could act as a confidence builder for said teams, such as North Texas was actually scheduled to take on A&M last year. That game never happened, but hey, now you look at UAB, and now they're scheduled to take on Georgia. So, Rachel, do you think that having them on your schedule, do you think that's like a confidence boost, like, hey, in order for us to be a big football team, you have to take on big talent?
I think you have to, and especially in this preseason when you're still learning about yourself, these are the games you have to do that. Even if you're playing a team that you're going to lose to, I think those are the times that the teams are going to learn the most about themselves, and I think they're going to improve very much off these games, and I think that these are important games to schedule, even if the possibility of winning is very low.
So, Mark, I'll kind of head over to you. UTEP, they have actually already played 3 games now, and they were 2-0 ahead to last night's performance and losing quite largely to Boise State. Your reaction?
Well, you know, Boise State is one of those teams in the group of 5 that's always been very successful. They've always had a winning tradition. UTEP doesn't really have that. They have been getting the better these past couple of years, and their D-line actually looks pretty solid. But I don't see anything coming out of UTEP, sadly. They're still kind of the bottom of the barrel of the CUSA, but they are coming up in ranking.
Connor, do you expect UTEP to kind of make a good bounce back from this game?
Well, Miners are coming up from the underground right now. UTEP has started the season hot because of their strength of schedule. New Mexico State and Bethune-Cookman, a lot of teams would win those 2 games. Now, in the past, I haven't been high on UTEP, and I'm not high on them this season, but their schedule moving forward, at least for the next couple of weeks, provides an opportunity to start or to get into the second weekend in October. They could have a winning record. They got New Mexico, and UTEP has a bye this coming week, next week, and then they play New Mexico, who's going to be coming off the Texas A&M game in their non-conference. It's going to be at UTEP. Close game. I'd favor UTEP with those factors I just mentioned. Then UTEP plays Old Dominion at home. So UTEP could have a 4-1 record. It can kind of be a little eye candy, a little fool's gold because their schedule's not that difficult. You see a 4-1 record for UTEP, you're like, my gosh, what's UTEP doing this year? And then you look at their schedule, and then afterwards, after that Old Dominion game, I think reality's going to hit UTEP. But with the super senior year this year, you had a lot of players come back, and so it really helped those teams that are usually in the bottom of college football to have more depth for this season. And so I think that depth is helping UTEP beat those teams that they otherwise would have lost to in other years. So obviously the Miners are better than what they were, but it's a little bit of fool's gold because of their strength of schedule.
So other teams we can easily look at: Middle Tennessee, Marshall, LA Tech. There's a lot to talk about there, but it's real early on, but I know this is pretty popular that we want to kind of look ahead to what could be. So looking at standings and how that could go, Connor, do you have any sort of prediction for who could potentially take the Conference USA crown this year?
I think you're going to have some dark horse teams this season, again, because the super senior factor this year, you have a lot of players who came back. You notice in week 0 and week 1, we had a lot of lower scoring games. It's because two things. One, because a lot of teams had a lot of returning production, their opposition knew what they had. So the defensive game plan, it makes it easier for defensive adjustments. And number two, we had an actual off season, so the defenses can get up to snuff. That's why last year we struggled, or the defenses struggled, because there was basically no off season. So I want to set a precedent there with that, because the super senior teams could break through this year, and one of them is UTSA. Mark mentioned them earlier. They have a chance to win Conference USA this year. They get UAB at home. UAB struggles on the road. UAB is a much better team at home. If UAB was playing UTSA at home, I'd say no chance for UTSA. So UTSA, from the West Division of Conference USA, is definitely a breakthrough team for the Group of 5 this year nationally. And then from the East Division of Conference USA, I'd watch out for Western Kentucky. Marshall, the way they ended last season, I know they beat Navy, but there's a lot of teams who would beat Navy right now. I kind of feel bad for the midshipmen, although they are going to be playing with a little bit of more energy today because of 9/11 playing Air Force, as well as all the academy schools will be today. But Marshall, a little questionable with how they ended last year. They have a new coaching staff, new coordinators. Not really sure what to expect out of Marshall. I know they're going to be pretty good, but really good. Western Kentucky, why? Bailey Zappi came in from Houston Baptist. UNT's familiar with him because he threw all over the UNT defense last season. So Western Kentucky from the East Division is a team to watch for.
Yeah, there's a lot of college football to look forward to this season and a lot from Conference USA. But actually, we'll kind of branch apart from Conference USA and kind of go national when we return. Our predictions on what we expect for the rest of the season and even for the week itself, as well as some fresh new news according to the Big 12 for new teams. We'll have details when we return. Welcome back to Mean Green Game Day. I'm Zach Fox alongside Rachel Sanders, Connor Hibbett, and Mark Barrera. Now, there's a lot of college football to look forward to and pretty big news according to the Big 12, but we'll get to that here in a sec. There's a lot of teams that you want to see Cinderella stories. There's a lot of upsets that you want to see. There were a lot of upsets even last week. So let's go ahead and move into what could potentially happen this week. Rachel, what's your biggest takeaway and your hot take for this week's matchups?
My hot take is I think Penn State is going to win the Big Ten, and I think they're going to even go to the college football playoffs for the first time ever. Their defense was incredible. They did so many things off of a quarterback who I thought potentially could have been a Heisman winner in Graham Mertz. Their special teams, they blocked a few field goals. They did the things that they needed to win. Their offense needs to get a little better, but I think with them stopping Wisconsin, I think it's going to be really interesting to see how that goes, and I think they could definitely take it all the way.
So do you think it'll come down to an Ohio State-Penn State thing, or do you think Penn State's just going to take it all the way?
I think Ohio State, Penn State. I think I kind of want to see Penn State go against Alabama, but I think that'd be an interesting game with the defenses. I'm a little worried about the offense of Penn State in that game, but I think it would be so much fun to see something just awesome for college football playoffs this year.
So do you see something kind of going wrong with Ohio State? I mean, it tends to be Ohio State in the Big Ten, so that's why I'm trying to get with them a little more. But yeah, they had a little rough week 1 where they're going to have a big game today against number 12 Oregon. But Penn State, they like mentioned, the offense is on its way up. But I think it's going to come down to when those two face each other. Don't be surprised if they're mirror images of each other. It may come down to that game. Do you think?
I think it's definitely going to be that game that's going to decide the Big Ten. But I think Ohio State's a little young, and with losing a lot of players to the draft last year, you definitely have to look at Penn State. And Penn State did have some adversity last year with losing in their first game. But I think they learned from that, and I think this offseason was a good thing for them, and I think everyone's healthy, and I think it's going to be a great year for them.
Mark, who do you have? What's your team you're looking for?
Cincinnati Bearcats. The Cincinnati Bearcats will make the college football playoff this year, and I will give you plenty of reasons why. A lot of the times, the reason group of 5 teams do not make the college football playoff is either they don't have the tradition that a lot of the Power 5 schools have, they don't have the strength of schedule as well as the Power 5 schools have. The Cincinnati Bearcats play Notre Dame, UCF, Tulsa, and SMU, and I believe that they will beat all of those teams pretty handily. They went last year, and they have the tradition as well of being a very successful college team. They played in the Peach Bowl last year against Georgia and lost, but it was a very close game. But yes, I do believe Cincinnati will make the playoff.
Making the playoffs all the way. Do you think there's any team that can give them their biggest shocker? I mean, you're taking on a team like Notre Dame. Now, Notre Dame, we saw last year and the year before, it seemed like they always somehow managed to get between the top 5, and we all kind of sit here and go, how did you get to the top 5? Because when you take on Alabama, you're like, no competition here.
Mm-hmm.
Give us something to watch. And so with Cincinnati, do you have a team that you're kind of looking at like, oh, on the schedule, okay, there is that one team. This one's going to be the factor.
It's Notre Dame, because Notre Dame has that tradition of being the best college football program ever. And they always do end up making the playoff, but get shellacked by Alabama. And there's usually always 2-3 virtual locks for a college football playoff, and that's Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State. Clemson just lost to Georgia, and then Georgia's going to have an L in their schedule as well to Alabama in that conference championship game. So that's already 2 teams having an L on their schedule and on the resume, while the Cincinnati Bearcats will be undefeated and going into that 4th spot of the playoff.
That is a hot take. Connor, what would be yours?
I want to kind of bounce off of what Mark just said. If you are writing Cincinnati off this season because they are from the group of 5, that is wrong for this year because of the super senior factor. Keep in mind, Cincinnati had their breakthrough last year, so they garnered their respect last season. They moved up in the polls in 2020, and now they started 2021. Not just finished, started the season high in the polls. They started in the top 10 to begin the season. They have a road game at Indiana, road game at Notre Dame. They get UCF and SMU at home. That strength of schedule is going to be enough if they were to go undefeated, although they do have to win convincingly inside conference. I think they can do that with the road and home games, how it works. I think Cincinnati is a legit playoff contender this season, so I just want to bounce off of what Mark said. So don't write them off because they're group of 5. It's different for the super senior year. Any other year with the current politics that surround college football and the playoff format, I would say no. But this year is different because of the super senior factor. A hot take from me, Zach, you said earlier, what's your weekly hot take for this week? I think ECU could upset South Carolina. South Carolina's got a lot of questions in the back end of their defense. They're playing an explosive passing attack with ECU today, East Carolina. Watch for ECU to make a bowl game this season. I'm going to give 4 quick takes, hot takes if you will, bold takes for the season though. I think Boston College gets to 8 wins for the first time since 2009. Very manageable schedule. They play today. They won last week. I think they're going to win this week. They play UMass this week. I look for Boston College to start off 4-0. They get Missouri in a couple of weeks. Big non-conference game. They get them at home. A lot of those swing games, if you will, that determine whether a team goes 10-2 or 8-4, they get those games at home this year. So watch for BC. They also got a very underrated quarterback in Phil Jerkovic. He could be a potential 2nd, 3rd round pick in the upcoming NFL draft. Nevada from the Mountain West. They are a super senior team like no one this season. They've got, of their 22 starters, they've got 17 seniors and a couple of juniors who are likely going to be picked in the draft. So they're not going to look the same next year. They beat Cal in week one, 22-17. They've got a legit defense this season, Nevada does, as well to go along with their offense with Carson Strong at quarterback, one of the best quarterbacks in the group of 5, if not the country. They've got the best receiving core in the group of 5, in my opinion. Watch for Nevada this year to win their first Mountain West championship game in program history. A couple of other little small takes. Colorado, who almost won the Pac-12 South last season. I don't know if they're going to get to bowl eligibility this season. They played, coming into the season, they had 6 top 25 teams in their schedule. Kind of like UTEP right now with their record. I think Colorado's record last season was a little bit fool's gold. Gold in the state of Colorado, yes. I don't think Colorado gets to a bowl game this year. That's my take. BYU, my other take. I think BYU goes 6-6 or less this season. Now, I know that's a huge step back, but think about this. We're in a year of the super seniors, meaning lots of teams are returning 15-plus starters. In fact, in the average year, the returning production is about 63, 64% of the total stats coming back for a team for the upcoming year. For this season, it was 75%. BYU was last in returning production in the year of the Super Senior. They lose Zach Wilson. And more importantly, their schedule is more difficult this season than what it usually is. Now, remember, before the pandemic, BYU was an annual 7-5, 8-4 team with a decent schedule. Now, this season, they're last in returning production, and they have a much more difficult schedule. It's going to be a struggle this season for BYU, so don't be surprised if they finish 500 or less.
That is definitely some hot takes there, but for me personally, I think North Carolina, Sam Howell, had 3 interceptions last week and 1 touchdown pass in the 17-10 loss to Virginia Tech. I have them out of the top 25 this year. Right now, they're sitting at number 24 in the nation. Yes, their defense do return 10 starters, but the defense wasn't good last season. And the offense, in one of the biggest games of the season, scored 17 against Notre Dame. I'm calling a 7-5 season for them, but do not make the top 25 nonetheless. Let's go ahead and kind of go over to the Big 12. Big news there. Obviously, we had earlier in the offseason, we had Texas and OU make their way to the SEC, and that'll be there by 2025. But as of late, we actually have news that BYU, you just mentioned, Cincinnati, you just mentioned, as well as Houston and the University of Central Florida have all been accepted into the Big 12, and looks like BYU is actually the first one to come into the Big 12 by as early as 2023. Mark, your take.
I think it's just a way of the Big 12 reloading and trying to recover from the losses of their really 2 big names in college football, being Texas and OU. I will say, if Texas and OU were to go to the SEC this year, they would be going under 500 because those 2 teams are very questionable at best, especially going up with the competition of the SEC. But that's besides the point. UCF and Houston and Cincinnati all were very good American Conference teams that will end up being just a very solid program and having a bigger brand of becoming in college football by being in the Big 12.
Now, Rachel, I know you're a big Oklahoma Sooner fan, so seeing Texas and OU go to the Big 12, do you think that the next 4 teams could comfortably sit in next to Baylor, next to Tech and other schools like that? Do you think they can sit in just fine?
I think they can do just fine. Houston last year in the men's basketball tournament made it to the Final Four, and they did a great job. Did they win? No, but I feel like that's a great start. The only thing with BYU is you're going to have to deal with them not being able to play on Sundays, which is going to be a pain, but I feel like that's something you can easily work with. I think UCF opens the market for recruiting to Florida, and it gives a lot of these schools that didn't have entry before that chance. And I think the question is, are they still going to be Power 5? That's to be determined. But I think overall they did a great job getting people to come to them and getting schools that you wouldn't necessarily think would want to come. I think they chose some of the best schools. I'm a little shocked about Houston only because of location. I think they could have done something better, but other than that, I think it's a good thing for the Big 12, and I think it's a good thing.
Connor, do you think with these 4 teams moving in, does this change your BYU take at all?
Well, that would be a few years in advance, and we are in a very fluid society, so that I would use the term near future for that. My take for BYU was for this season because we know what the forecast is for this season. We know what their schedule is for this season. We know what the teams have. That's looking too far in advance. But for BYU, and really for any team or individual, we are in the day and age in sports, regardless of the sport, of brand, name, image, and likeness, marketing. We've been in the marketing era for a while, but it's even more so now. So whether you are an individual or a team that needs to improve its brand, there's going to be changes. So if you're an individual, you're going to hit the transfer portal. If you're a team, you're going to move to a different conference. It's all about brand. How can you improve your program?
There's a lot of hot takes throughout NCAA this season, and a lot even start today. A lot of big games, some rivalry games will be set to watch those. But that'll take it to the commercial break for now. As we look back, coming into the next time, we'll actually be looking forward to UNT and SMU players to watch, as well as some stats of the recent history between the 2 foes. Stick around. Welcome back to Mean Green Game Day. I'm Zach Fox alongside Rachel Sanders, Connor Hibbett, and Mark Barrera. Right now we're going to look ahead to UNT SMU. Big week, rivalry week. This will actually be the 8th year in a row that these teams have faced each other, and the last time UNT won was actually in 2018 at Apogee, but the last time that they won in Dallas at SMU, 1933. 15 games ago, so a lot to look forward to and potentially snap this lengthy losing streak. Actually, there's a lot of good talk with them. UNT head coach Seth Luttrell as well as Sonny Dykes for SMU. They're actually go back to their old coaching days. They've actually coached together before. They're good friends, so have a little reunited there between the coaches, as well as Trey Siggers, running back now for SMU. He's their second string. Taking on, now taking on a UNT defense that he knows far too well. So there's a lot of good, it's almost like a homecoming, but it's weird because of how these two kind of bicker back and forth as far as rivalries. But Connor, I'll go ahead and take it to you first. What's something that you're planning to watch for? What are some players or some moments that you're looking forward to for tonight's matchup?
I think the UNT defense is going to have to do their best to keep everything in front of them and make SMU work for their points. No explosive plays, no 75-yard touchdown pass. Make them go the length of the field, and if they have to take 6-7 minutes off the clock and score touchdowns, you'd like to get stops in the red zone, but as long as you make SMU work for their yards and points, that's what I want to see. And it's going to start with the UNT defensive line like I mentioned earlier. If they can get penetration with 3 to 4 guys, it'll be a much better story for the UNT defense because the SMU receivers are so explosive. You're going to have multiple defensive backs in the backfield. You can't just have guys on an island because that's not going to bode well for UNT. So the defensive line, it starts with the defensive line because if they can't get penetration with 3, 4, 5 guys, they're going to have to bring a 6 and a 7-man front, and that's not what you want against an SMU offense with explosive playmakers all across the board on offense. So defensive line's penetration is going to be the key thing in this game.
UNT last week, they actually had 4 takeaways, 3 fumbles, and 1 interception. That is actually tied for third most in the tenure of Seth Luttrell. Do you think that the turnover margin may even play a difference here? Connor.
I think it definitely does. I just don't think SMU is going to have – I don't think they're going to have problems with turnovers in this game. When you look at the 2 quarterbacks, at least that are going to be starting in this game, forbidding any kind of bad injury, and I would never wish that upon anyone. Tanner Mordecai for SMU is one of the best receivers in the group of 5, or one of the best quarterbacks in the group of 5. And Jace Reuter for UNT struggled a little bit in week 1, to say the least. So right now it's looking like UNT is going to have the problems with turnovers if you were to scrutinize that much. But I don't want to scrutinize that much. I just want to see how the game plays out. But in terms of game plan, the UNT defense, the defensive line, is going to have to play its best game.
Mark, we're going to go ahead and take it to you. Connor took a defensive route. Do you think that the offensive side of things, particularly the rushing game, they've had significant success in the rushing game? UNT has, coming off near 245 yards rushing, yet they only allow, or when they take on SMU, they've only been able to have about 128 yards average. Do you think that becomes a factor?
It does, and the reason so is because shout out to Delano Robinson. I played with him when I was 12 years old. DC Raiders select football team and in high school. He has racked up 2 seasons of over 150 tackles as a linebacker, and the SMU defense is pretty good. So I think what UNT needs to do is rely on that big old line that we have, rely on the 4 out of 5 seniors that we have, run it down SMU's throat, and keep doing it until they can stop you. And if they do stop you, that's when you can try to give the ball to Chase Reuter or even Austin Aune if he ends up getting in the game, and pass it, but make sure that SMU offense tries not to touch the field and make sure not to give up big plays like Connor said, and just take the time of possession into UNT's hands and be able to control the game that way.
Now, you mentioned not giving up big plays, but Mark, do you think that UNT needs big plays. Usually, Jace Ruder, from what we saw last week, 10 of 21, he didn't have too many deep balls. He kind of went like the Tom Brady route. Let's just kind of go little by little and pick you apart. Austinani, as soon as he came in, had a huge deep ball down the middle of the field. Do you think that we need the big plays in order to be successful tonight?
I do believe we do need the big plays, but I think it has to come from the defense. Offensively, I think they need to control the game and be able to just, like I said, waste clock, essentially. And then on defense, I think that's when you need the turnovers, like you said. You need the turnovers, the forced fumbles, the sacks, the tackles for loss, the big hits. You need those in order to spark up the team, because this is an away game, and Dallas will be rocking because it is a rivalry game. I think the big plays need to come from the defense, and I don't know if it will, but in order for UNT to win, they has to.
And Rachel, just with the offensive side of things one more time with the rushing, although the success, DeAndre Torrey in recent years, obviously he was not the starter last year, he had 45 yards rushing last year against SMU, and that was at home. We'll see how we do with the veteran offensive line. What's your take for this upcoming game?
I think Torrey's going to have probably one of the best games of his life. I think between him and Ragsdale, I think that they're really going to run the running back position very well. I'm hopeful that the offensive line can keep those holes coming and give them the chances. I think that they need to be smart and efficient. With the defense, they need to just do the best job they can. I know that if the defense does get 3 takeaways in this game, which sounds kind of hopeful, that with Seth Littrell as the coach, we've been 9-0 when that happens. So my hope is that somehow that happens. And I think they also need to be aware of the slot receivers with people like Grant Calcaterra, who came from OU and Auburn, and him not being able to make those big explosive plays like you're talking about, with the defense holding them back and just doing their job and doing what they can to essentially make it where the offense can take this game.
It's ironic that last season we had such an issue with the quarterback side of things and can't be consistent, but yet they were the number 8 offense in the nation. It's like, despite not having a stable leader, you're still putting up some success. In fact, that's even transpired to this most recent game with Northwestern State, where they had 7 plays that went for at least 20 yards. That doesn't happen too much against SMU when UNT takes them on. What needs to happen at SMU for UNT to come out with a win today, Rachel?
I think the running backs and the wide receivers are going to have to produce, and they're going to have to get those extra yards. I don't know about Ruder's arm. I know it's accurate. It's not perfect. I think Ani's arm is a little better, but I think it's really going to be more on the people on the runs after the pass or the runs after, and that if they can get the yards, that's where it's going to be.
Connor, did you have a...
Play in a phone booth, like Mark said, keep the ball away from SMU, but more importantly, I think from the UNT offense perspective, besides hogging the clock and keeping the ball away from SMU is going to run an aggressive style of defense, so you're going to have to open up the passing game. Now, I'm not talking about long throws down the field and trying to test the safeties. No, easy throws to start the game. Get Jace Ruder into a pretty good feel for things, then start opening up the passing game. But more importantly, get your playmakers in space. Make SMU play in space. Don't let them crowd the box. Don't play in a phone booth to the extent where you can't even pick up any yards on the ground. Play in a phone booth to the degree where it's easy throws, simple runs to where you're getting those 3 and 4 and 5 yard plays, but hog the clock. And I know UNT likes to run a hurry up offense, but if you want to actually beat SMU, which is something I know UNT wants to do, that's going to be the key, is keeping the SMU offense off the field and taking advantage of every single yard you can get in a smart way, though.
Mordecai this year, obviously a transfer from Oklahoma, and put up big numbers even in week 1 and is set to do so yet again. Shane Buechele torched the UNT defense last season, and now it seems like it could very easily happen again. Mark, from the defensive side of things and the cornerback side of things, that's always been an area where UNT has been a little lax, especially when it comes to, hey, you make a great stop, but you held the defender in the process. Do you think penalties can play a big process to a team who loves to pass, to a defense who, frankly, has been tough to cover? Do you think that penalties may even be another big factor in this one?
I mean, penalties are always a huge factor, and that's honestly the discipline of the coaches if they end up getting a lot of penalties. You're taught to look around and turn around your head as a DB when the ball is up in the air. Do not get tunnel vision and get locked on Grant Calcaterra or someone like that, and then end up getting a pass interference all the way down at the 15-yard line. So I think penalties do have a really big chance to change the game, but UNT just has to make sure to play a very disciplined game. That is how you're going to beat a good team like SMU. You have to be disciplined on your keys, disciplined when it comes to penalties, and disciplined when it comes to doing your job.
Clean, confident, powerhouse defense, and let's say another 500 yards. Easy, right? We'll see if they can do it tonight against SMU. Now, when we return, we'll actually go over our predictions for some of tonight's or today's biggest games. Stick around. SMU, UNT next. Welcome back to Mean Green Game Day, and we are just about wrapped up, but we have some big predictions to make as some of the nation's top games, as I'm joined with Rachel, Connor, and Mark for the final segment. Here we go, guys. Looks like Iowa and Iowa State taking on each other today. Mark, who you got?
Iowa State. I think Iowa State is going to be able to get it out of there. I think it's going to be a very tough environment. Going to be a very low-scoring game, but I got Iowa State.
And Rachel, I kind of go with you as well.
I got to go with Iowa State. You got the quarterback with Brock Purdy, and you've got running back Breece Hall, who I think is just going to run all day. So.
Yeah, Iowa State as well. And Connor, I believe just about the same.
Iowa State as well. College game day at home. It's the most electric atmosphere you could argue in Ames history. Did you see the traffic this morning on some of the highways in Ames? The atmosphere is going to be electric. I know Iowa State didn't look great in week one, but they have similar scores no matter who they play. So don't look at like, oh, they barely beat Northern Iowa. Iowa State always bounces back from those. And again, guys, Iowa State's a team that no matter who they play, it's going to be a similar score. So I expect a 2017, 23-20 kind of score, but Iowa State pulls it out at home.
There are also some of those games, it just seems like you can have some of the worst teams taking, like the worst team, and then you have the best team take on each other. Like if you have a Michigan State thing, there was a time where Michigan was up top, Michigan State was down, and then yet I always seen when those two took on each other, you always have this glorified matchup. It's amazing to see. Another one that we have going on this weekend is Stanford and USC. I personally have USC. Rachel, who you got?
I also have USC. Stanford didn't do well against Kansas State. I think they'll win by a very heavy margin. I think 2 touchdowns at least.
And Connor?
I have USC at home. Stanford's not. They're in a transition year this season. They're also going to be starting Tanner McKee at quarterback. That's his first game. He's never played before, so this is going to be his first time on the college football field. He's going to be in the Coliseum. Give me USC.
And finally, Mark, who you got?
I have USC as well. I'm not as low as Stanford as these other people on the panel with me, but I have USC as well.
And now we're going to go ahead and switch over to a team that I can personally root for, and that is the Texas Longhorns, as they will take on Arkansas. A big rivalry game. We haven't seen that in a few years, and right now I have the Texas Longhorns taking it out against Arkansas. Rachel, who you got?
I got to agree. I think the Texas Longhorns are going to win this out. I don't think Arkansas has the experience, and I think that Texas is going to be pulling it out with their defense. So I'm going to be interested to see that come out.
Connor?
Ames, Iowa, Columbus, Ohio are going to have some great atmospheres this week today, but so will Pig Suey. Arkansas has had this game kind of pinned on their schedule for a while. It's an old rivalry here, so I can't wait to see how this game goes in terms of the psyches with the players. I don't think Arkansas's offense is going to have enough to exploit the Texas defense. I think Texas wins a close game.
Connor, do you think that there's still any bad blood between the two? I mean, you're talking about an old rivalry, and now it's at Arkansas. Do you think there's going to be any sort of muck today with those two teams?
I think there will be. An old rivalry to the degree that it was at one point, that never goes away. And even though they haven't played in a while, the players know what the history is. And so the players, especially with the home crowds being back in 2021, Arkansas starting off 1-0, Sam Pittman's providing a new energy, I expect the psyche to be off the charts in Fayetteville today.
Mark, Texas or Arkansas?
I got to go Texas.
Texas.
Texas, yes. And piggybacking off the rivalry thing, the atmosphere will be very electric. People don't forget old rivalries, because I'm pretty sure once Texas plays Texas A&M, that will be an amazing atmosphere.
That is definitely one game I can say that I will definitely be tuning into. Last time, obviously, Texas A&M took on each other. Justin Tucker with a game-winning field goal. Lots of good stuff there with that game. We're excited to see that. Our next one as we transition to will be Missouri and Kentucky. I personally have Missouri pulling off the upset today. Quarterback Connor Boslak, 257 yards passing last week, 2 touchdowns. The last time these two took on each other was last year in October, and 20-10, Missouri won, and they basically had the football the entire time. The Missouri Tigers, I think they're going to have a pretty good day today. I think it's going to be a pretty good game, though, because just like we mentioned a second ago, sometimes you can have a team that's over-under. I mean, it is polar opposites, and yet you're still going to have a game as if it was like a number 1 and number 2 seed. I mean, and I think that's going to be what happens today at Kentucky. But Rachel, we'll go to you.
I think you're wrong. I think it's Kentucky by a touchdown.
Okay.
I think Kentucky has the advantage in this game, and I think it's still going to be an interesting game with both of them being pretty squarely matched up, but I think Kentucky takes it.
It's a close game. That's exactly what I was trying to get at, but go Connor.
Kentucky finally has a good offense this season. They bring in a former Penn State quarterback in Will Levi. They got a good receiving core. They got Wan'Dale Robinson, a transfer from Nebraska. I think Robinson's going to have a huge impact for the Kentucky offense. Their running game has been good for a long time, so I expect that to be good. But again, the difference maker, I think, for Kentucky this season, I think Kentucky could be a breakthrough team this year. Schedule works out very well. They get those swing games, including this one at home. The winner of this game has a possibility of finishing second in the SEC East this season. Not exactly high on Florida. Florida has to play both road games against Kentucky and Missouri. I'll pick Kentucky in this game. I think they win a close game. But I think, again, the difference maker is going to be the Kentucky wide receivers, not just to this game, but I think it's going to help them be a breakthrough team and cross that threshold into a better offense for the Wildcats this year.
And Mark, Battle of the Cats, who you got?
I got the Kentucky Wildcats on this one. Yeah, piggybacking off of what Connor said, Kentucky, I think, is just going to be a little bit more talented than Missouri.
There you go. Well, let's go ahead and quickly go through UNT SMU. Despite the optimism that we saw last week, I still think it's going to be too much for UNT to handle. I'm going to have UNT losing at SMU later on tonight. Rachel, who you got?
I also, unfortunately, have UNT losing at SMU. I think it'll be a little closer than what people are thinking. I think it'll be a 14-point difference. I think our defense is actually going to show up. It's just I don't think they're going to show up the whole game, and I think Mordecai's going to have one quarter where he just goes off on them, unfortunately. So I think SMU is going to take the victory.
And one quarter just may do it. Connor?
I think SMU wins, and I think they win decisively. I don't like how UNT matches up. But if UNT has any shot in this game, line of scrimmage, both offensively and defensively, are going to have to play out of their minds. But I do think the Mustangs win.
And finally, Mark, UNT, SMU.
Sadly, SMU. If UNT wants to win, they got to piggyback off of that Mizzou-Kentucky win.
Yeah, definitely a lot to look forward to tonight, and we are excited to see that. But as we look to the game of football, you also got to thank those who keep us free and the lives that were put on hold for 9/11 20 years ago. We pay our respects to the first responders and everyone who was affected as a nation and right there in New York City. We appreciate you, we respect you for that, and we will never forget. You can also follow UNT Sport, our Mean Green Show, on Twitter, YouTube, and all of our social media handles. As for all of our amazing cast and crew, I'm Zach Fox alongside Rachel Sanders, Connor Hibbett, and Mark Barrera. Thank you for your time this time. Until next time, God bless.